Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair, you are in good company. This is the place where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you, plainly, what they actually mean for your plate. No fear, no hype, no miracle promises. So grab a coffee if you've got one, settle in, and let's look at this together. Today we are doing one of my favorite kinds of videos. The kind where we take a claim that is absolutely everywhere online and just calmly, carefully, check it against what the research actually says. And this one has a serious fan club. I'm talking about Soursop, the big green spiky tropical fruit, sometimes called Graviola, sometimes guanabana, depending on where you're from. You have almost certainly seen the headlines. The ones that say it is 1,000 times stronger than chemotherapy. The ones that say it is the fruit your doctor won't tell you about. The ones that say it kills cancer cells. So the question on the table today, the exact question I put in the title, is a fair one. Does Soursop really kill cancer cells? And by the end of this, I am going to give you the honest verdict, what the studies genuinely show and what they genuinely don't, and then I'm going to tell you the part almost nobody in those breathless videos ever mentions. A real safety catch with this fruit that you deserve to know about before you go buying the extracts and the teas and the capsules somebody's selling. Stay with me all the way to the end for that part, because it's the piece that actually matters most for your health. That is not a tease, that is a warning. Before we go any further, let me do the thing I never skip on this channel. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor. I have never had cancer myself, and I have never treated a single patient. Everything you're about to hear is me reading published studies and translating them into plain English for general education. It is not medical advice. It does not replace your oncologist. It does not replace anything your care team has you doing right now. Please, whatever you take away from today, take it to the people who are actually looking after you and let them steer. Nothing on a plate and nothing in a bottle should ever go in place of your treatment. Alongside the people caring for you, never instead of them. That is the rule on this channel, and I mean it every single time I say it. Now, let me tell you where I personally land on this topic before we open a single paper, because I'd rather be honest up front than pretend I'm arriving at this with no opinion. I think Soursop is genuinely fascinating from a biochemistry standpoint, and I think most of what is said about it online is genuinely reckless. Both of those things are true at the same time, and holding both is the whole job today. There is a real thread of legitimate science here. Serious laboratories have studied this fruit, and they found something real. But the distance between what they actually found and what a YouTube thumbnail claims is enormous. And in this particular case, that distance isn't just about disappointment, it's about safety. I have watched this fruit get sold as a miracle for years, and I'll tell you where I'd actually land by the end. But first, let's understand what Soursop even is, and why anyone got excited about it in the first place. Because the origin of the story is worth knowing. Soursop is the fruit of a tree called Annona muricata, which grows across the tropics, through the Caribbean, across South America, through West Africa, into Southeast Asia. The ripe fruit is soft and white inside, creamy in texture, a little sour at the edges, and people describe the flavor as somewhere between a pineapple and a banana with a squeeze of citrus over the top. It's genuinely pleasant to eat. It has been eaten and brewed into teas in traditional medicine for a very long time, across many cultures, for all sorts of ailments. That's the food side of the story. Now here is where the science comes in. Soursop, and especially the leaves and the seeds of the plant, contains a family of natural compounds with a mouthful of a name. Annonaceous acetogenins. I will translate that right now, and I will never make you say it again. Acetogenins are a group of natural chemical compounds this particular plant family produces, and the leaves of Soursop alone have been found to contain more than 100 distinct ones. These compounds are the reason the whole story exists, because in the laboratory, certain things they do caught researchers' serious attention. So let's look at exactly what those researchers found, carefully, word by word. The most cited overview of this research is a substantial review published in 2015 Inches, the International Journal of Molecular Sciences, by a researcher named Mogadam Tusi and colleagues. They pulled together the available studies on Annona muricata, and what the studies showed taken together is this. When you take these acetogenin compounds from Soursop and you apply them to cancer cells growing in a dish, in the laboratory, those compounds are toxic to the cancer cells. They push the cells towards something called apoptosis. And apoptosis is just a scientific word for programmed cell death, the built-in self-destruct switch that sits inside every healthy cell and that cancer cells are famous for finding ways to switch off. So in the dish, in the laboratory, these compounds can switch that self-destruct mechanism back on. That is a real result, documented by real scientists. And so, I have to say the honest sentence right here, the one the whole title hangs on, and I want you to hear every word of it carefully. When you read that Soursop kills cancer cells, what that means precisely is that certain compounds extracted from the plant killed cancer cells in a petri dish and in some studies in animals. It is a dish result. It is an animal result in some cases. It is not, and I need you to hold on to this, it is not a result in a living human being with cancer. Not one properly conducted human clinical trial has shown that consuming soursop treats cancer in people. Hold on to that, because it is the hinge of everything we are doing today. Now, how do these compounds actually do what they do inside the dish? This is the interesting mechanism, and I want to walk through it because it connects directly to the safety piece I promised you, and you'll see why in a moment. The main acetogenin that researchers focus on is called annonacin, and what annonacin does is it disrupts a very specific piece of machinery inside the cell. Every cell in your body, and every cancer cell too, has tiny power stations inside it, called mitochondria, the little energy factories that generate the cell's fuel. And within those power stations, there is a specific first stage in the energy assembly line that scientists call complex 1. Annonacin is what researchers describe as a complex 1 inhibitor. In plain English, it clogs up the very first step of the cell's energy production line, so the cell cannot generate its power properly, runs out of fuel, and dies. That is the mechanism. Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, one of the most respected cancer institutions in the world, describes it in exactly those terms in their integrative medicine herb database that Graviola appears to cause cell death through energy depletion by blocking the cell's ability to make its own power. So the science is not nonsense. There is a real compound doing a real thing to a real cell. The entire trouble, starts the moment somebody takes that dish result and points it at a human body as if the two are the same thing. So let's do exactly that translation, slowly and carefully, because it is the most important move in this whole conversation. In a petri dish, you have cancer cells suspended in a small pool of liquid, and you apply a concentrated dose of the purified compound directly onto them. Nothing stands in the way. The compound is right there, at a strength you've precisely measured, touching the cells immediately. A human body is nothing like that. When you eat a fruit, or drink a tea, or swallow a capsule, that compound has to survive your stomach acid first, then get absorbed through the wall of your gut, then get processed and partially broken down by your liver, then get diluted into your entire bloodstream, and then somehow arrive at a tumor deep in your body at a dose concentrated enough to matter, all without causing damage to every healthy cell it passes through along the way. Think about that word, diluted. The dose that killed cells in the laboratory is a concentrated puddle of purified compound poured directly onto them in a bowl. The dose that eventually reaches a tumor buried in your body, after your gut and your liver have had their way with it, is a tiny fraction of that original amount, spread through gallons of blood, touching every kind of tissue you have. Those two numbers are not in the same universe. That, by the way, is precisely where that absurd headline about being 1,000 times stronger than chemotherapy comes from. Someone took a dish result, where a concentrated compound was toxic to cells in a controlled laboratory setting, and dressed it up as if it produced that same outcome inside a living person. It never did. No study has ever shown that in a human being. It is a laboratory number wearing a human costume. And that point about harming healthy cells along the way is not a side note, it is the heart of the danger. Because complex 1, the energy assembly step this compound disrupts, is not something that only cancer cells possess. Every cell in your body runs on it. Your heart cells, your nerve cells, the neurons in your brain, all of them depend on that same machinery. A compound that shuts down that process does not come packaged with a label that says cancer cells only. Let me say that more carefully, because it is the crux of the safety issue I've been building toward, and I want to make sure the weight of it lands. The very same mechanism that makes anonacin toxic to a cancer cell in a dish is a mechanism that is equally capable of being toxic to healthy cells, and as we are about to see, to some very specific and irreplaceable healthy cells in particular. That is not a fringe concern somebody invented. That is documented in real people, in a real population, in a real peer-reviewed journal. And it is the part that almost nobody in the Soursop Cells online world will ever tell you, because it does not help them move product. So here it is. There is a place in the world where soursop and its close relatives from the same Annona plant family have been eaten heavily for generations, in the fresh fruit, and, crucially, brewed into herbal teas from the leaves, and that place is the island of Guadeloupe, in the French West Indies. Picture a warm kitchen, a kettle on the stove, a handful of dried soursop leaves steeping into a tea that somebody's grandmother swore by, drunk every single morning for years, the way some people drink chamomile or peppermint. That daily cup, over years, is the thing to hold in your mind, because it turns out to matter enormously. For years, doctors practicing in Guadeloupe noticed something unusual. They were seeing a disproportionately high number of patients with an atypical form of Parkinsonism, a Parkinson's-like neurological disorder. Not ordinary Parkinson's disease, but something with a different and more troubling profile. Severe movement problems, pronounced stiffness, a mask-like face, difficulty with balance, and a very specific inability to look up and down smoothly, what clinicians call vertical gaze palsy. And unlike ordinary Parkinson's, this form did not respond to the standard Parkinson's medications that typically help, so they investigated carefully and properly. In 1999, a case-control study was published in The Lancet, which is one of the oldest and most rigorously peer-reviewed medical journals in existence, by Caparros Lefebvre, Elbaz, and their colleagues. A case-control study, just so we're all on the same page, compares people who have a condition to a matched group of people who don't, and looks carefully for differences in their exposures and habits. What the researchers found was striking. The people with the atypical Parkinsonism were far, far more likely to have been heavy, long-term consumers of these Annona fruits, and, most strikingly, of the herbal teas brewed from the leaves. The association they measured was not a borderline finding you could easily explain away. It was strong and stand out, the kind that makes careful scientists pay serious attention rather than shrug. And subsequent laboratory work, much of it led by a researcher named Lanuzel and colleagues, pointed at the likely mechanism connecting it directly to that same compound we've been discussing, annonacin. In experimental settings, annonacin damaged and destroyed the very dopamine-producing neurons whose deterioration drives Parkinson's-like disorders. Now, I will always be a careful scientist with you, so let me say this precisely. A case-control study establishes a strong association, a documented link. It is not the same level of evidence as a randomized controlled trial, and other contributing factors may be at play. I am not overstating it, but it does not stand alone in the dark either. It is corroborated by the bench science, showing the exact molecular mechanism by which this compound is toxic to those specific brain cells. When a population study and the laboratory science point at the same target from different directions, you take the convergence seriously. And the mainstream medical establishment does take it seriously. Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center flags this explicitly in the same integrative medicine database entry I mentioned earlier, warning that Graviola alkaloids caused movement disorders and symptoms mimicking Parkinson's disease. That is not me being dramatic. That is one of the world's premier cancer centers putting a formal warning label on this fruit's compounds. So the picture we are now standing in front of is this. The same fruit being marketed to cancer patients and cancer survivors as a miracle treatment contains a compound that is, in plain and honest English, a neurotoxin, a nerve poison, one where heavy, long-term consumption has been linked in a serious medical journal to a devastating neurological disorder that does not respond to treatment. And the people most likely to be taking it in heavy concentrated doses are, tragically, the exact people most vulnerable, the people going through cancer treatment, the people already under enormous physical and neurological stress. Now, I want to build on that and be precise about where the risk sits, because I do not want you to walk away thinking that eating a piece of soursop at a Caribbean restaurant is going to give you a brain disorder. That is not what the evidence says, and I will not overstate it. The compounds are most heavily concentrated in the seeds and in the leaves, and the pattern linked to the neurological harm in Guadeloupe was specifically chronic, heavy consumption of the concentrated leaf tea, drunk daily over years, along with the seeds. The ripe fresh fruit itself contains lower levels than the leaves and seeds. An occasional serving of ripe fresh Soursop fruit, the way people have eaten it for generations across the Caribbean and South America, is a very different thing from taking concentrated Graviola extract capsules every day, or brewing and drinking strong Soursop leaf tea morning and night, or using any preparation involving the seeds, which have long been treated as a separate toxic hazard. And here is the specific irony that I genuinely cannot get past, because it is the thing that should make everyone selling this stuff stop and reconsider. The products being marketed hardest for cancer, the concentrated leaf extracts, the high-dose capsules, the potent leaf teas, are precisely the high-dose, high-concentration forms that carry the greatest load of the neurotoxic compound. The marketing is actively steering frightened, vulnerable people toward the most concentrated and most risky versions of the plant in the name of fighting their cancer. The commercial incentive and the safety reality are running in exactly opposite directions. That is not a small thing. I sat with a woman a while back, I'll call her Arlene, a retired bookkeeper, 70 years old, sharp and funny and completely on top of things, who came up to me after a community health talk with a little cloth bag of Soursop leaf capsules tucked in her purse. Her sister, who lived across the country, had mailed them to her after a worrying scan, along with a long handwritten note about how this was the natural answer the medical system was hiding. And Arlene was not a foolish person, not in any way. She was frightened, and she loved her sister, and she wanted something she could do with her own hands while the medical system moved at what felt like an impossible crawl. When we sat together and I walked her through what I just walked you through, the dish results, the missing human trials, and then the Guadalupe story, the part that landed was not the disappointment about the cancer claim. It was her face when she understood the safety piece. She went quiet for a moment and then said, "So this could actually hurt me?" And I said, "In the concentrated daily form, taken over time, the honest answer is yes. It carries a real documented risk, and there is no proven cancer benefit in humans sitting on the other side of the scale to weigh against that risk." She put the capsules back in her bag and said she was going to call her oncologist the next morning and ask about all of it, about the capsules and everything else she'd been taking, before she swallowed one more. That was the win. Not that she found a better treatment, that she stopped and asked the people who could actually see her whole picture. I think about Arlene every single time one of those Soursop miracle videos makes the rounds, because the claim doesn't just cost people money. Sometimes it points them directly at the thing most capable of harming them. Now, let me name the objection out loud, because I know what some of you are thinking right now, and I would rather address it directly than pretend it doesn't exist. You're thinking, come on, Becker, it is a fruit. People have eaten it for centuries across entire regions of the world. How dangerous can a piece of fruit possibly be? You're being an alarmist. And that is a fair and reasonable instinct. So let me answer it honestly. You are right that a piece of ripe fresh Soursop eaten occasionally, the way people have always eaten it, is a low-risk food, and I am not standing here telling you one slice is going to harm you. That is not the argument. The argument is narrower and more specific and more important than that. The concentrated extracts, the high-dose leaf teas, the seed preparations, the exact forms being sold online with cancer claims attached, are where the documented risk lives. And there is nothing proven in humans on the benefit side of the ledger to justify taking that risk. That's not scaremongering. That is just reading both halves of the research instead of only the half that makes for a good sales page. A thing can be a pleasant tropical fruit and also a source of a documented neurotoxin, depending entirely on the dose and the form, and an honest person holds both of those facts without flinching from either one. Wait, let me back up for just a moment, because I want to make sure I've been fair to the research and I want to give you the full picture on what the evidence actually does and does not support. The petri dish findings are real, and the mechanisms are genuinely interesting to researchers studying cancer metabolism. The WCRF, the World Cancer Research Fund, and serious academic labs continue to study compounds from plants like Soursop as part of broader cancer biology research, and that work is legitimate and worth following. what does not exist, what Cancer Research UK states plainly, and what Memorial Sloan Kettering states plainly, and what every honest review of this compound states plainly, is any evidence from human trials that consuming soursop or graviola extract treats or prevents cancer in people. There are no phase 2 trials. There are no phase 1 dose escalation trials in cancer patients. There are in vitro studies, and there are some animal studies. The gap between those and a proven human treatment is not a gap the internet is allowed to pretend doesn't exist, and I will not pretend it doesn't exist either, even if it would make for a simpler, more satisfying video. I promised you the honest version, and that is the honest version. So let me be as straight as I know how to be, because this is the honesty turn, and it is the most important stretch of this whole conversation. Does Soursop kill cancer cells? In a petri dish and in some animal models, yes, its compounds are toxic to cancer cells, and that is a real and scientifically interesting finding. Does eating soursop, drinking soursop tea, or swallowing soursop extract treat cancer in a human being? There is no good evidence that it does. Not a single properly conducted human clinical trial showing benefit. The major cancer centers, Memorial Sloan Kettering and Cancer Research UK among them, state plainly that there is no proof this plant treats cancer in people, and both urge caution around the concentrated preparations. So this is not a story where the science is quietly on the fruit side and the establishment is hiding the results. The science, read honestly and completely, is thin on benefit and concrete on risk. None of this is a cure. A food does not kill cancer in your body the way a headline says. This shifts nothing in a human being at a treatment level, because it has never been tested at a treatment level in human beings. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not reading the same literature I'm reading, or they are choosing not to tell you the part that doesn't sell. Here is the coldest, plainest thing I'll say today, and I need you to sit with it for a moment. There is a real, documented downside to concentrated soursop preparations, a link in serious peer-reviewed literature to a devastating brain disorder, and there is no proven cancer benefit in humans on the other side of that scale. When a thing carries a real documented risk and an unproven benefit, that is not a treatment, that is a gamble, where the odds are stacked against you. Anyone who tells you to prioritize this over your actual treatment, or even to add it to your treatment without telling your oncologist, is not on your side, no matter how warm or natural or empowering they sound. I had a man, I'll call him Gus, tell me once that he trusted the fruit more than the doctors, because at least the fruit was natural. And I said to him, as gently as I could manage, that arsenic is natural, and hemlock is natural, and the compounds in these very seeds are natural too. Natural has never meant safe. Natural just means it grew somewhere. The question is always, what does it do? At what dose? In what form? And to what cells? Those are the only questions that matter. And for soursop in concentrated form, 2 of those answers are genuinely concerning. So here is what I actually want you to do this week. And this is the practical piece, the one thing. If soursop is a fruit you enjoy, and you can find the fresh ripe fruit at a Caribbean grocery or a specialty market, eating it now and then the way people have for generations is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It's a genuinely pleasant fruit that carries some vitamin C and some fiber, like a lot of tropical fruit does. And there is nothing about occasional fresh fruit consumption that the evidence flags as dangerous. That is the low-risk, plate-level version. Enjoy it as the fruit it is. What I want you to do this week is, actually, the opposite of buying something. If you have a bottle of soursop or graviola capsules in your cupboard right now, or a bag of the dried leaf tea, or any preparation involving the seeds that somebody sent you, or that you bought from an online store with a cancer claim on the label, take it out, set it on your kitchen counter, and before you take one more dose, take a photograph of the label and bring it to your oncologist or your primary care doctor and ask them directly, is this safe for me, with everything else I'm on, at the dose I've been taking? That is the whole assignment this week, not a purchase, a conversation. The fresh ripe fruit as an occasional treat is fine. The concentrated cancer cure products, put them down and ask first. Especially if you are on any medication at all, because an agent that disrupts cellular energy machinery is not something you want running alongside your treatment drugs without anyone who can see your full medical picture knowing about it. Here's where I'd actually land. and I'll tell you what I'd put on my own plate given everything we've just covered. If I wanted the pleasure of this fruit, I'd buy the fresh ripe fruit if I could find it, eat it the way you'd eat any exotic tropical fruit, and I would not touch the concentrated extracts, the seed preparations, or the daily leaf tea habit. Because the potential upside of the concentrated form is unproven in humans, and the potential downside is documented in a major medical journal, that trade-off does not favor the concentrated form. That is where I land. And if Soursop is on your mind because you or someone you love is dealing with cancer, I genuinely understand the impulse to reach for anything with a promising mechanism. That impulse comes from love and from fear and from wanting to have some control over something that feels completely out of your hands. Bring that impulse to your oncologist. Ask about integrative nutrition. Ask about the evidence on diet and cancer biology. Ask what is actually known. There is real evidence-based nutritional guidance for people navigating cancer from the AICR, the American Institute for Cancer Research, and from WCRF, the World Cancer Research Fund, and that guidance does not involve gambling on unproven concentrated extracts. It involves real, achievable, plate-level choices that have actual human data behind them. I'll be covering those on this channel one by one, because that is exactly what this channel is for. The internet wants every one of these stories to be a hidden miracle that the doctors are keeping from you. I understand the pull of that narrative, especially when you are frightened and you feel like the system is moving slowly and you just want something in your own hands. But the real Soursop story is quieter and, I'd argue, genuinely more important than the miracle version. There is a real mechanism, compounds that disrupt the energy machinery of cells and kill cancer cells in a dish. There is the hard truth that a dish is not a body, and no human trial has ever shown this to treat cancer in people. And there is the safety catch that the salespeople leave out entirely, that this same plant carries a documented neurotoxin with the highest concentration sitting in exactly the forms they are most aggressively selling to the people most vulnerable to harm. You are not powerless. You hold real levers, a thoughtful plate, a strong relationship with the people treating you, and an honest read of what the evidence actually says versus what gets sold. Those levers are real and they matter over time. Use them. Bring the whole Soursop question to your care team if it's on your mind, and let the people who can actually see you make the call alongside you, never instead of you. And if this video helped you think through something more clearly today, or if it gives you something useful to bring to your next appointment, that is exactly what this channel is here to do. Tell me in the comments, honestly, did you believe the Soursop headlines before today? I read every single comment on this channel, and I genuinely want to know where you landed. If you've got a question about something else you've been hearing about, drop it below. And if someone in your life needs to hear the honest version of this story, share it with them. Because sometimes the most useful thing we can do for the people we love is hand them the actual facts before they spend money they can't afford on something that won't help them and might hurt them. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this.